It's the Cornetto Corner with Angelika and Elizabeth. Yeah!
Hello, my name is Angelika Moreland.
And I'm Elizabeth Kennedy.
Welcome back to Season 2 of the Cornetto Corner.
After a semester-long hiatus, we are back and better than ever, and excited to talk about today's concept of nationalism versus exoticism.
First and foremost, we would like to start with some definitions that we're going to be covering throughout most of this podcast. Nationalism, in music terms, is when composers write in the musical style of the country that they are in, usually in order to celebrate their culture. An example of a piece that a composer uses nationalism is Dvorak's New World Symphony.
In contrast, exoticism is the quality or state of being exotic outside of your own nation. In a musical sense, it is when composers get inspiration from foreign cultures and or places. They incorporate these cultures into their own compositions through the use of folk music, certain rhythms, and melodies. An example of a work that uses exoticism is Bizet's Carmen.
Let me explain more on Dvorak's use of nationalism. There are some arguments saying that Dvorak wasn't actually a nationalist, but we'll get into why those people are wrong. And why he actually is a nationalist composer. But first, let's give you some background history on Dvorak. Anton Dvorak was born in 1841 and died in 1904. He's from Czechia, which is now called the Czech Republic. In the 1890s, he got invited to be the director of the National Conservatory of Music in the United States of America by the founder, Jeanette Thurber. Thurber was an advocate for making high-level music education accessible for people of color and women. She believed that Dvorak could help guide American music in a new direction. At the time, most American music was inspired by only Germany and European music, but Dvorak did not like that America didn't have its own musical identity. So he decided that whenever he goes to America, he was going to help them create their own sound during that time. He decided that the best way to do this was to write a symphony influenced by different cultures of America. He would title this work the New World Symphony, and the title New World reflects the unfamiliar and new traditions that he's seeing outside of the European traditions he's used to. While directing, Dvorak studied the culture and music of African Americans and Native Americans. He believed that using these two cultures would be the greatest form of nationalism because of how deep and rich each of their histories are in relation to America. He was influenced by one of his students, Harry T. Burleigh. He was an African American composer and baritone singer who sang him some spirituals for Dvorak. Melodies in these spirituals strongly influenced the melodies in the New World Symphony. Dvorak famously said, "The future of music in this country must be founded upon what are called African American melodies." This was a bold and progressive statement for the time, especially coming from a white European composer. Let me tell you more about this symphony. Dvorak wrote his Symphony No. 9 in E minor, titled From the New World, in 1893. During his time in America, it premiered on December 16, 1893, by the New York Philharmonic at Carnegie Hall. It was conducted by Anton Seidl, while Dvorak sat in the audience. The premiere was very popular despite the cold and rainy weather conditions. There was even a line queued up outside in the rain. After listening, many people believed that it was the greatest symphony composed in America, and it quickly became very popular. This popularity did not stop after the premiere. It remained a favorite to many, and its influence can be felt in the works of later American composers like William Still, Florence Price, and Aaron Copland. The New World Symphony went on to become a symbol of American musical potential. Each of the symphony's 4 movements explore different musical ideas. The first movement is a slow and mysterious one, and it served as an introduction to the themes and traditions throughout. The second movement, Largo, features an English horn solo inspired by the spirituals from Goin' Home. He created melodies in the style of the spiritual, but it was not directly quoted. This movement was also performed at funerals of Presidents Franklin Roosevelt and Gerald Ford, as well as performed by astronaut Neil Armstrong during the Apollo 11 mission, symbolizing the music's connection to exploration and the idea of a new world. The third movement is a scherzo influenced by Native American dance rhythms. He related them to Czech folk dances, which some critiques did not like, because his goal was to help America acquire their own style. The fourth movement, Allegro con Fuoco, was written when he was about to leave America. It brought back earlier themes and ended the symphony with intensity.
So, how are people calling him a nationalist composer when he's from a different country? I thought he couldn't call himself an American nationalist if he's from Czech. Plus, he still had some European influence in the New World Symphony.
Yeah, that's actually a big argument. I believe that you don't have to be from the country to be a nationalist. Nationalism is whenever you feel advocacy of or support in a nation. It does not have to be your own. Many people do not like where they're from, so they have nationalism for a different country that they might have moved to or something. In Dvorak's case, because he researched American culture and fell in love with it, as well as him writing a symphony in celebration of their culture, I believe that he's an American nationalist composer.
Oh, okay, so that makes a lot more sense. So then, what about the symphony still having European influence?
Yes, that made a few critiques upset. Dvorak was just trying to help America start their own identity, and since he's originally from Czech in Europe, that's the style he's used to. So, of course, there's going to be some influence. I mean, what pieces weren't at the time, right?
Yes, I guess that is true.
So tell me, how was Bizet an exoticist composer?
Georges Bizet, along with many other European composers of the 19th century, had this fascination with the concept of the other. So before I dive into his exoticist tendencies, let me give you a little bit of background about this French composer. Born in Paris in 1838, Bizet grew up surrounded by fine arts his entire childhood. When he was 9, he started to study at the Paris Conservatory, and he grew to really enjoy composition and was best known for his operas in his later life. Bizet wrote about 30 operas in his lifetime, Carmen being the most famous. Georges Bizet was not able to see his legacy and influence due to a fatal heart attack at the age of 36. It was only about 3 months after the premiere of the opera. He actually thought he died a failure because Carmen did not take off until months after his passing. But before Bizet's passing, the social reaction to his opera was not what he had been hoping for. Many people thought that the plot and the main character were too scandalous for its time. Carmen was this passionate and traumatic love story it had a seductress as the focal character. There was a lot of themes surrounding death, jealousy, love, and passion. And this was a shock to Paris because it was not like the traditional and lighthearted operas that they had seen before it. Composers were interested in Spain due to its unfamiliar, magical, and seductive atmosphere. This sort of stereotype about Spain was created by composers who either visited the country or researched it enough to think they could compose a piece using Spanish methods.
So, how did this interest in Spain and exoticism develop?
That's a great question. So specifically in France, with Spain and its development in exoticism, Napoleon III's reign, there was an influx of Spanish immigration to Paris that happened. Spanish theater companies began to take Parisian stages and influence composers. This caused the birth and spread of a concept called espagnolade. Espagnolade is a style of music where French composers basically portray Spain in this exotic and romanticized way. And it basically exploded after the premiere of Carmen in 1875. As I had mentioned earlier, Bizet was never able to see his influence on composers, specifically Claude Debussy and Igor Stravinsky. These two composers were also fascinated with this concept of foreign and faraway places like Spain. It seemed that after the premiere of Carmen, Debussy and Stravinsky's curiosities had been developed. Iberia and the Firebird Suite, their two pieces, both use similar techniques that Bizet used in Carmen. There are Spanish-inspired rhythms like the flamenco and habanero, and there are also seguidilla and the habanero can also be heard in both Bizet's Carmen and Debussy's Iberia. It turns out that he didn't even spend more than a few hours in Spain, but with impressionistic tools and his imagination, he was able to create a picture that was saturated with Spanish inspiration. Igor Stravinsky's The Firebird Suite was also written in 1910 as a concert score for a ballet written by MUHL. It is based on an old Russian folktale where an evil ogre kidnaps a princess. This firebird is the magical creature that rescues the princess. Both Bizet and Stravinsky created this larger-than-life main character. Like Bizet, he also employed these sort of chromatic gestures that represented the supernatural figures. The Firebird Suite was also considered scandalous for its time because Stravinsky used an uncommon orchestration and it was not traditional or conservative.
Wait, so how does a Firebird Suite use Spanish exoticism if it was based on a Russian folktale?
So this is actually an argument that's been debated, but there is sufficient evidence for Spanish influence by not only Georges Bizet, but other composers that he spent time with in Spain. Stravinsky spent about a month in Spain with a composer and a pianist named Jesus Ball Ige and Rosa Garcia Escott. They usually partied in their private homes, they smoked and drank together, and they listened to a lot of music. It can be assumed that during his time there, he learned and experimented with some different styles of Spanish techniques in his compositions. Like Carmen, the Firebird Suite has this lush orchestration, this exotic melody, and Spanish-inspired rhythms.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. Did Carmen have any other impact on 19th century orchestral compositions?
Yeah, actually, Bizet's opera not only impacted the instrumental side of composing, but also the dance side of things. So, concert scores written for ballets, like the Firebird Suite, also included lots of Spanish influence, which impacted the style of choreography. Hispanic dances, like the gypsy dance used in Carmen, the habanero, and the sevillanas started to be incorporated into ballet. They also used this sort of dramatic and sweeping movement that conveyed the intensity and the sensuality of Spanish music.
Oh, that's really interesting.
It really is. There's so much research done that shows Carmen's influence on 19th century orchestral compositions. It's been so fascinating to dive deeper into this concept.
Speaking of influence, do you think it was Bizet's goal to influence other composers to use foreign cultures like he did?
So, Bizet's primary goal with writing Carmen was to break the societal expectations. He wanted something that was dramatic and explored more of the character's emotional depth. Exoticism came into play when he based the opera off of a novella, and we can see it definitely did influence other composers, though. So, what about Dvorak? Was his goal to influence other composers to use nationalism in their writing?
Initially, no. His goal was to create a national music identity for America because, at the time they didn't really have one. And but Dvorak's goal did influence other composers to do the same thing.
So, what exactly are some parts in Dvorak's symphony that are influenced by Native American and African American styles?
So, as I mentioned earlier, one of his students sang him African American spirituals, which in his symphony you can hear melodies influenced by those. Also, African American dance rhythms are throughout the scherzo, which is the third movement. Some Native American styles are heard throughout with his use of like the pentatonic scale and repeated rhythms and poetic storytelling.
That's really interesting. I also find it really interesting how different yet similar these two compositions and their results are.
Yeah, like how both of their pieces were their own interpretation on how America and Spain sounded. The difference is that Dvorak spent time in the United States to gain a more local way of understanding music, while Bizet never really even visited Spain. His interpretation was purely on research and reference.
Exactly. They were also both influenced by folk music. Like you had said earlier, even though Dvorak was trying to wrote a piece trying to help the American identity, he just kind of naturally incorporated that Czech folk tune throughout the New World Symphony. And Bizet also utilized the old Spanish folk tunes throughout Carmen while composing.
Well, that just about about wraps everything up. Comment down below if you believe that Dvorak is a nationalist composer or not.
You can also comment down below if you think Carmen influenced later 19th century composers. Thanks
Thank you
for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe.